Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Govea. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, my friends, we're talking about an intrusion. This is the word that Trump prosecutors used when they said District Court Judge Eileen Cannon took the documents away from them and gave them to the special master. Of course, they appealed that, and now we have landed at the Supreme Court. We're going to take a look at the docket because the government prosecutors responded to Trump's application to the Supreme Court. And as usual, before we get into that segment, we have to really get our bearings straight on this because remember, we are working all the way up to the top. We started just talking about the documents all the way through the special master, Judge Cannon, the 11th Circuit, up to Clarence Thomas, and then it's SCOTUS time, baby. So we've got a 34-page order that we're going to go through. You can see it here, and I can't wait to sink our teeth into this. It's not an order, I'm sorry. It's actually a response. This is the government's response. We're going to get some type of order from the Supreme Court later. Can't you just see how excited I am? 34 pages, baby. And it's going to be good. So we're going to go through all of that in the first segment. Then we're going to change gears and talk a little bit election 2022 because it's that time. It's going to be some serious election conversation. Things are heating up all across the fruited plains. We saw today big headlines. Tulsi Gabbard is walking away from the Democratic Party. Just said, I'm out of here. I've had enough of you people. You are a bunch of warmongering, race-baiting wokesters, and I don't want anything to do with you. And she said, I'm out of here. And really causing a lot of fervor out there. A lot of the Democrats saying, good, we don't want you anyways. Get out of here. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. And the Republicans are saying, okay, well, that sounds great. What took you so long? It's nice to have you over on our side. Although I don't think she's actually a Republican now. Don't know where she's actually landed. We'll see. But we'll talk about that. We have a clip from Joe Biden. He said that, one reason that Tulsi might be leaving is because of the president. But she said, the president said that Putin is both rational and irrational, which is very interesting. I'm going to be curious to see how you can be both of those things at the same time. MSNBC had some pretty serious polls for us. Democrats not looking so good in a couple of key metrics. The big issues facing most of the country, inflation and jobs. Republicans way up in those numbers, whereas the Democrats, they're focused on abortion, not doing so hot there. We're going to check in with John Fetterman. MSNBC, they said, things are looking a little bit rough for him out there. And it's not funny to laugh at somebody who's had a stroke, unless they're running for Senate. Then it kind of becomes funny because it's like, what the hell is going on here? But he can't apparently hear or speak. I thought he just had problems speaking, but apparently, according to MSNBC, he also can't even hear appropriately without some transcriptions. And so we'll get into that story. We're going to check in what's going on Arizona. Project Veritas just had a nice drop on Katie Hobbs, which is hysterical. And so I don't like the clip from Project Veritas because, they are they have their own media platforms. I like to sort of encourage you to go over there. But we are going to check in on some of the Katie Hobbs saga because she appeared on one of the mainstream channels and they said that, you sure you're not going to be debating Kari Lake? And she said, we're almost out of time. There's only 30 days left in this thing, and my schedule's pretty much full. Kari Lake then appeared with Donald Trump in Arizona. And, if this is even a close race, I'm going to have a lot of questions about what's going on in Arizona because, holy moly, it's not even close. Anyways, then in our final segment, we're going to take a look at Kamala. Cackling Kamala. We actually have to listen to a clip of her today. I apologize in advance. But yeah, it's about, I think, a minute long. I try to do my best not to play Kamala clips on this program, just for the sake of all of our eardrums. But it has to be done because she is hilarious. She's calling the Republican governors like Abbott and others. She's saying that they are derelicts. They have been derelict in their duties. And they're responsible for the migrant situation. And you say, you're the federal government, weirdo. Joe Biden gave you the job to go in here and stop all this, and you haven't done it. Meanwhile, New York City declared a state of emergency last week. We have a migrant who is crossing the border and says, it's great to be here. Thanks, Joe Biden. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me in. And then we've got a clip from J.D. Vance where he's sort of doing the old switcheroo he a funny clip from him. So, and I wrote in there, someone's doing the raping. I remembered that. I don't know why I wrote that one in there. Somebody's doing the raping is basically what he said. Although he didn't say that. I think that's what he was getting after. So as you can see, my friends, boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to get to today. And it's going to be a full program. And if you want to be a part of the show, the best place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can see our amazing community down here. They are chatting away. We've got Jason on blast. See the Veil. We have Bonnie Specs over there, Anti-Fragile Old Cat Lady. C. Reed's in the house. Paul Mino's in here. And Paul Mino made an amazing GIF yesterday for my brother Joey. And I showed it to Joey, and he said he loved it, by the way. He said it was outstanding. He said it's so good that it should be on Channel 3 News. And I said, it is. I agree with you completely. So thank you, Paul, for doing that. He said it has to be on Channel 3. Send it over there. And I said, well, you're right. I think it should be on Channel 3. So shout out to our friends over on Locals. Shout out to our friends on Rumble. And big shout outs to Cretrellier. Says, with a Rumble rant, says Tulsi is the actual rogue, both in appearance and actions. That came in over from Cretrellier over on Rumble. So shout out to Cretrellier for that one. Very appreciative of that. Yeah, we're going to get into some serious Tulsi stuff. And of course, our friends on YouTube, we've got Curtis Bartle. Shout out to Zulu. T. Ken is here. K. Bean's in the house, along with Ronnie Cole. Shane Sows is over there, along with Frank. Hello, Vashna, K. Bean, Curtis, and others. Hey, shout out to Gio. He's also here. And so you can join as a member on YouTube. We appreciate that as well. And of course, I am a lawyer at the R&R Law Group. We're a criminal defense law firm in Scottsdale, Arizona. We represent people charged with crimes all over Arizona. We have an amazing team of people dedicated to helping good people who have been charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that in their lives. So if you happen to know anybody who's traveling through Arizona or who lives here and they're in trouble with the law, that's what we do. My whole team, we're dedicated to that every single day. 480-787-0394 or online at rrlawaz.com. And I appreciate your support. Your referrals do keep us busy, keeping us focused on our mission and our life's work. But now it's time to get into the program. And so without any further ado, let's get into it. Government prosecutors file their response with the United States Supreme Court. We can see it here. It's a 34-page document. We are going to go through it in detail. These things usually have some nice summaries that we can really pull some teeth from, and we are going to dive into that. But before we can properly do so, we have to understand what we are talking about, because there's been a lot of activity in the Trump Mar-a-Lago saga. And here on the screen, you can see the beginning where this all started. And remember, we're talking about these Trump documents. When the FBI raided his residence, they came in, they found these documents. In my opinion, they pulled them all out of separate boxes and then threw them on the ground here for a photo op. But the point remains, they took the documents. And we are fighting about a very small sliver of the entire pie. If you recall, there was about 11,000 documents totaling maybe 200,000 pages, but a small subset of that 11,000, 100 of them were actually classified. We had two categories, the non-classified documents and the classified documents. So we're not talking about these 10,900 documents. Those have already been dealt with. We're only fighting about these classified materials. Now, Trump's team is saying that they don't have to give these 100 documents to the U.S. government. The DOJ, the FBI, they took the documents out in these boxes and they held on to them. And Trump said, those documents are not yours. Those have to go to a special master, because there's all sorts of force fields that Trump as a defense can exert over those documents to protect them, namely attorney-client privilege, saying, hey, government, you think those are yours, but they're not yours. I got attorney-client privilege over them. Those are executively privileged. They're not yours. These are personal records. They're not presidential records, and there's precedent for this in the Bill Clinton sock drawer case. We've also talked about declassifying documents. So maybe those 100 documents that were classified are no longer classified and they're not in the appropriate category. So Trump's team is raising all sorts of issues with these. They're saying you don't just get free range access to our documents because you say that they're classified. You can't just presume that they're yours because you put a sticker on it. That's ridiculous. But that's the argument that the DOJ has been making. So all of these documents, they got filed with the FBI. Donald Trump filed an action with the district court. Of course, we know who received that. That was Judge Eileen Cannon. So we're working our way up the tree. Judge Eileen Cannon appointed Special Master Raymond Dearie to come in and help with some of these documents. Raymond Dearie said, perfect, I can't wait to dig into all of these documents, including the 100 classified materials. And so this was all going according to plan. Special Master Raymond Dearie is going to take those documents and then categorize them and say, oh, no, Trump, you actually don't have privilege over this. You don't have attorney-client work product privilege, or you do. Or these are presidential records, or these are personal records. He's going to be the referee to help over this whole thing because Judge Cannon communicated that the DOJ was kind of screwing a lot of this up. Raymond Dearie starts to go through the boxes. The order hits. Then the U.S. government filed an appeal to the 11th Circuit. They took this up. They appealed two things. One was about whether they could continue to prosecute Trump. They can. The second was about whether they had to actually give these 100 classified documents over to the special master. The 11th Circuit said, oh, yeah, you definitely have to give those over to this. You actually don't have to give those over to the special master. Judge Cannon said Raymond Dearie was going to referee all these things. The 11th Circuit said, nope, no, you're not. Those are going back over to the FBI and the DOJ. No referee over the 100 documents. So then Donald Trump filed this document here, the appeal to the Supreme Court, and we read all of that in a prior video. We did a deep dive, read through that whole document as well. He appealed the 11th Circuit ruling, which did not give the documents to the special master, which stopped that from happening. He took it up to the Supreme Court, and he said that the special master order that came out from Judge Cannon was not appealable. In other words, because of the nature of the appeal, it's called an interlocutory appeal. It's an appeal not of a final judgment, but it's an appeal of an intermediary proceeding. In this case, it was the appeal of the appointment of the special master, not an appeal of a guilty conviction. Just as the case is progressing, we got to appeal just this little thing. And so Trump said, okay, well, they did that. The 11th Circuit ruled on it. It went against us. But the 11th Circuit, they didn't have jurisdiction over that issue in the first place. They don't have the ability to rule on an interlocutory appeal. So they filed that up to Judge Clarence Thomas. Judge Clarence Thomas, you see here, he's been the subject of a lot of scrutiny lately because of his wife, Ginny Thomas, and because he's a conservative and liberals hate that. And so he is the person in charge of this district. And this district now is, of course, being monitored by the Supreme Court because Judge Clarence Thomas, as we know, is on the United States Supreme Court. And so we're going to get the full court on this thing, I would imagine, sooner rather than later. But you can see this is what the docket looks like. From the United States Supreme Court, you see that it was originally docketed on October 4th. The appeal is from the 11th Circuit. And if you'll notice that Judge Clarence Thomas, because he presides over the 11th Circuit, he said that the application was filed and that the government response was due by Tuesday, October 11th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And you can see October 11th at about 4 p.m. Eastern, the government filed their response, the response to the application from the respondent United States. So they just got that skidding in there, as usual, right before the deadline. And now let's take a look at it now that we have the background and we understand exactly what we are looking at. Government prosecutors respond in the Supreme Court of the United States. Donald Trump filed an appeal contesting the withholding of the 100 classified documents from the special master. This is Donald Trump versus the United States up on appeal from the 11th Circuit. You see, the title of this is from the government prosecutor. Her name is Elizabeth. She says, "This is our response from the government in opposition to Trump's application to vacate the partial stay issued by the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. That partial stay is stopping. It's staying the order that Judge Eileen Cannon already granted, which was going to give the special master 100 documents. So Trump says, I want the stay to go away. And the government is saying, no, we want the stay to stay. Do not vacate it, Supreme Court. Here's what they have for us. They are referencing the related proceedings, of course, out of the lower courts, along with the search warrant case. And this is the response. The Solicitor General respectfully files this response in opposition to Trump's request. This application, writes government prosecutors, concerns an unprecedented order by the district court, that's Judge Eileen Cannon, restricting the executive branch's use of its own highly classified records in an ongoing criminal investigation. Now, this is the issue that we have talked about many times. They are sort of presupposing this. They're saying, as you can see, it says, these documents are already ours. It's our own documents. It's our own. See this there? They're not even contesting ownership, where this has been the entire basis of Trump's argument. He says, no. You don't just get to presume you own those things because you have your classified sticker on there. No, I mean, there's all sorts of things that we can do that supersede your possessory interest. We can actually say that those documents are ours because of executive privilege, attorney-client privilege, or any other basis for it, including the declassified or the personal records sort of exceptions or escape hatches here. But they're saying it's ours. And therefore, because it's ours, we say they're ours and we know they're ours. Therefore, it is unprecedented that you wouldn't let us do something with our own materials. But Trump is saying you haven't proven that yet. And so did Judge Eileen Cannon. That's why we have the special master, because he's going to help us decide this, who owns what. But they call that order appointing a referee unprecedented. And they sort of forget the fact that they raided, I guess, the president's house in Mar-a-Lago. You want to talk about unprecedented? My goodness. They're saying, but we, now as the DOJ, we have been stopped from running roughshod over the process. And for them, I'm sure that is unprecedented. Yeah, they're not used to that happening. They're used to doing whatever they want. They just pick up the J6ers and just throw them in solitary, and that's the end of it. Nobody even blinks an eye. But in this case, there's a judge who's pushing back a little bit, and they're saying unprecedented. They're saying that they are directing the dissemination of those very classified records outside the executive branch for a special master review. You want a referee to look at this stuff? In August 2020, they say the government obtained a search warrant to go and raid Trump's residence based on a finding of probable cause from Judge Reinhardt over a WhatsApp phone call conversation, warrant signed via WhatsApp, to believe that the search would reveal evidence of crimes, overdue library books, including the wrongful, as far as we know, they said that these were nuclear weapons and secrets and haven't seen anything close to evidence of that yet. And they say that all of this is bringing to light the wrongful retention of documents and information relating to the national defense as well as obstruction of justice. And again, what they're talking about is going to be the custodian of records document. They're saying that Christina Bobb, Trump's lawyer, signed a document saying we gave you over all of the records and you didn't give us over all of the records. Therefore, that's obstruction of justice. Because they are singling out their political opponents to go after these types of records when the Presidential Records Act, in and of itself, as we talked about here, demands an alternative remedy. It doesn't even contemplate criminal charges. It says all of this is supposed to be rectified between the National Archives and the outgoing administration. Prosecutors continue. They say, among other evidence, the search recovered roughly 100 records bearing classification markings, including markings of the highest and extremely restricted distribution, which, that's their phrase. Again, we don't really know what it is other than it's a highly designated document. Got it. 2 weeks later, after they raided his house, Trump filed a civil action asking for a special master to review the seized materials for claims of privilege and return of the property. And they asked an injunction be issued against the government from using those materials during the review process. The appointment of a referee, something I think is completely reasonable, especially in a case like this, where it is unprecedented, where you're raiding the home of a former president. Prosecutors say, district courts have no general equitable authority to superintend federal criminal investigations. In other words, courts don't have the legal authority to go and interfere with criminal investigations, which is true. Instead, challenges to the government's use of the evidence recovered in the search are ordinarily resolved through criminal motions practice if and when charges are filed. Also true. but they haven't filed charges, and they're using the investigatory phase of this case as a political cudgel, which is why everybody is demanding that there are guardrails on this, because it is unprecedented. They're saying, well, normally, listen, you didn't charge Trump with shoplifting, all right? He didn't steal a candy bar and you're charging him and you filed charges and this is going to be a routine case. No, there are all sorts of legal complexities here. And it's really a case of first imprint. Not seen before. We have a lot of issues to litigate about executive privilege and about presidential records and so on and so forth. But they want him, I guess, to just go through the regular proceedings like everybody else. Here, however, the district court granted, they say, the extraordinary relief that Trump sought, which is literally appointing a referee. That's it. No cases dismissed. They're not declaring the documents Trump. They're not saying that the US DOJ can never have them again. Nothing like that. All they're saying is that they just get to look, that the special master just gets to look at the doc. That's it. And the prosecutors here are saying it's the extraordinary relief. Like, this is insane. Ordering that the special master be appointed to review the seized property and stopping the use of the materials for criminal investigative purposes until the special master goes through them. Although the government believes, they write, that the district court fundamentally erred in appointing a special master, saying that Eileen Cannon shouldn't have appointed one in the first place, and that she shouldn't have granted the injunctive relief. The injunctive relief means that the government is sort of stopped from doing something. They get an order saying you can't prosecute him on using these documents anymore. So you just have to stop prosecuting him, right? It's an injunction. And they're saying we're appealing, and they're saying that Trump is appealing the court's order. Let me back this up a little bit, because they're saying here, although the government believes that the district court screwed up at a fundamental level, and they say, and we're appealing the entire order, the entire September 5th order in its entirety on an expedited basis, which is sort of new, right? This is sort of expanding the scope of the appeal on the 11th Circuit. They're saying the government sought only a partial stay of the portions of that order, right? That's what they were seeking. Okay, so there's two things. One, they're appealing the entire order, but when we were in front of the 11th Circuit, they were only focused on certain things, and the 11th Circuit gave them those certain things while the appeal is pending. All right, so now we are there's a lot of back and forth on this, so we'll try to keep the train on the tracks, but there's sort of an appeal. There is a stay pending the appeal, which had real consequences for the district court case, and Trump is appealing basically all of it, and now the prosecutors are also basically throwing all of it at the Supreme Court and seeing essentially what the Supreme Court wants to do with it all. And we'll see, right? We'll see what they're asking for. The government sought only a partial stay of those that caused serious and immediate harm, and the Court of Appeals granted that modest relief. And they said the U.S. is very likely to succeed, saying that the district court abused its discretion, saying that the special master shouldn't have had the classified documents. Now, the prosecutors at the Supreme Court, they say, in this court, Trump does not challenge the stay insofar as it allows the government to continue its investigation. And we talked about that. He's saying, fine, you can go ahead and continue to investigate me. Don't care about that. Instead, all we want is a partial vacation of the stay to the extent that the special master can't see those 100 documents. Prosecutors say Trump is not entitled to that relief for multiple reasons. So Trump is saying you can prosecute me if you want. The only thing that he really wants, that the government is acknowledging, is that the special master get those 100 classified documents. The 11th Circuit said, nope, special master does not get them. Trump is asking the Supreme Court to turn him back over. The government prosecutors, they continue. They say, most notably, Trump has not even attempted to explain how he is irreparably injured by the Court of Appeals ruling. They say Trump's inability to demonstrate irreparable injury is by itself sufficient reason to deny the relief from the Supreme Court. They say, Trump does not even challenge the Court of Appeals' determination that he's not going to suffer any harm from the stay. As the court explained above, they say, Special Master and the counsel all agree that the government would be harmed. And the government's been making this case that if they can't, go through these documents, if they can't rummage through these 100 materials, there's going to be all sorts of national security implications for this. And we're all going to die any minute now because of Trump's recklessness. And they're saying if Trump has the burden in this case because he filed this action to show that this would harm him absent a stay. The prosecutors also write, they tell us, Trump has also not shown that the Court of Appeals, in this case the 11th Circuit, made a clear and demonstrated error. The district court appointed the special master, meaning Judge Cannon, to review claims of privilege, but they say, but Trump has no plausible claim of privilege in or ownership of the government records bearing the markings. As the Court of Appeals recognized, they say Trump thus has no basis to demand a special master review those records. So the 11th Circuit is just saying the property does belong to the government, and because they're the government's records, Trump doesn't have any claim over them. And again, we have had debates about that for months now. Applicant, they say Trump does not acknowledge, must let even attempt to rebut the court's careful analysis of those issues. Instead, they say Trump principally asserts that the court lacked the jurisdiction to do what it did. And they say that's wrong for a couple reasons. First, they say that this is inextricably intertwined with the review. And they're giving us some heavy case law here. And they're talking about these interlocutory orders. And those are the orders. Most people think about appeals as the appeal of a final judgment. So like you see in the movies and the TV shows, when somebody gets convicted of a crime, the jurors come out and they say, we, the jurors, find the defendant guilty, right? And you go, oh, and it's the end of the world. And it's not good when that happens in most cases. But what happened, but then you think of that as the appeal. Well, before you even get to a trial, there's all sorts of stuff. You might have a fight over whether the expert witness can come into court and testify. The judge might say he can't come in, and you say, well, that's ridiculous. We have no case. We want to appeal that ruling. This is all they're talking about here. They're talking about special master shall be appointed, bearing classification markings, and we've got all sorts of case law from 2009. They say the Court of Appeals thus, meaning the 11th Circuit, correctly held that it had appellate jurisdiction over the order and that it could make the rulings that it made. And so therefore, if you remember, Trump's entire appeal was basically on that basis. Trump was making the argument that the basis for the 11th Circuit appeal was unfounded. They shouldn't have even gotten the document in the first place. And they're saying that's not true, and they gave us some case law for that. Now, the prosecutors give us a little bit of factual background here. They tell us that Trump's term of office ended in January 2021, and over the next year, NARA thought that they were missing some records. The Presidential Records Act provides that complete ownership of all this stuff belongs to the government. It says that NARA shall assume responsibility for control of the records. In response, write the prosecutors, in response to repeated requests from NARA, Trump ultimately provided NARA with 15 boxes of records back in January. NARA discovered the boxes contained items marked as classified. They had a fit over it. They said that we're all going to die, quote, exceptionally grave damage to national security if anything like this gets out. NARA referred the matter over to the DOJ, noting that the highly classified records were improperly transported and stored, and they sought access to those records. After receiving notification of that request, they asked about a claim of privilege in court, and they say that none of those things appeared to be classified or that had been classified had been declassified. So NARA has a fit. They send it over to the FBI. The FBI then is developing evidence, right? They're staking out Mar-a-Lago, and we talk about the mole at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. And they say, oh yeah, there's all sorts of problems. There's storage boxes and Melania's brasiers are in a place that might be compromised. So they start demanding subpoenas and responses from Trump. In response, Trump's counsel and his custodian of records, Christina Bobb, who we talked about yesterday, she produced an envelope containing approximately 3 dozen documents bearing classification markings. Trump did not assert any claim of privilege and did not suggest that any of those documents had been declassified. To the contrary, the envelope had been wrapped in tape in a manner consistent with an effort to handle the documents as if they were still classified. Some of the documents in the envelope bore classification markings at the highest level, including compartmentalization. So they're giving all sorts of documents back, the classified ones that they think are classified. They give them back. It sort of supports Trump's argument. It's sort of like all of those other documents were not classified, in his opinion. The ones that they thought were problematic or might be still classified, they wrapped up in tape, and they gave them all back. Trump's lawyers represented, meaning Christina Bobb, that those records had been retrieved from a storage room at Mar-a-Lago where boxes removed from the White House had been placed, and that no responsive records were located anywhere else at Mar-a-Lago. That's the custodian of records receipt. FBI says, do we have everything here? The head librarian from NARA is going to be super angry if we don't. And so, when I was a kid, we had the little cards that you put in the library books, the little, write your checked out by so-and-so on this date, returned by whatever, right? Slide that in there. Same thing here. We're in big trouble. So I need you to sign this document and put it in the boxes before we return these library books to confirm that there's nothing else that you have outstanding. Trump's custodian of records provided a sworn certification in writing, quote, on behalf of the office of Donald Trump, quote, that a diligent search was conducted of the boxes that were moved from the White House to Florida, and, quote, any and all responsive documents accompany this certification. The certification further stated that, quote, no copy, written notation, or reproduction of any kind was retained as to these materials. The FBI uncovered evidence, write the prosecutors, that the response to the grand jury subpoena was incomplete, that additional classified documents remained at Mar-a-Lago, and that efforts had likely been taken, oh my goodness, to obstruct the investigation, obstruction of justice, because they must have signed the custodian of records wrong. Let's see. The government applied to Judge Reinhardt for a search warrant. They cited different U.S. code violations. They said willful retention of national defense information, concealment or removal of government records, and obstruction. Those were the 3 charges we talked a lot about. Now, we also saw that there was some issues with these charges. Notice there's no classification charges, right? They're only removal and sort of process crimes, concealment, until you get to obstruction. So they submitted that all over to Judge Reinhardt, the lower level district court judge who granted the search warrant in the first place. Prosecutors say the magistrate judge found probable cause that evidence of those crimes would be found at Mar-a-Lago, and they authorized the government to go seize those materials. The magistrate judge, Reinhardt, also approved the government's proposed filter protocols for handling any potentially subject materials, anything that might come under the purview of attorney-client privilege. And as part of the warrant that Judge Reinhardt authorized, extremely broad, almost zero particularity, he said, if you see anything problematic, not only can you get what's in that box, you get to the box to the left, to the top, to the right, to the left, behind, to front, anywhere, cross dimensions, get it all, baby. Who cares? But in that proceeding, he said that, okay, you probably, want to take some care and caution if you're dealing with attorney-client privilege materials, and he approved a filter team to go in there and sort of literally filter the documents. Anything that the investigative team shouldn't see, the filter team goes in first and segments it out so that they aren't breaching all sorts of protocols. They continue. Government prosecutors write, the government executed that warrant back on August 8th, 2022. The search recovered more than 11,000 documents from the storage room, roughly 100 of which bore classification markings. In some instances, Even FBI counterintelligence personnel required additional clearances to review the seized documents. Prosecutors continue. They say, 2 weeks after the search, the applicant, meaning Trump, filed this pleading with the court, and they asked the district court to appoint a special master to review these materials for executive and attorney-client privileges and to stop the use of the governments against Trump. On September 5th, Special Master Eileen Cannon granted the request and said that pending resolution of the Special Master review, the government can't continue to prosecute Trump. The court explained that the injunction was issued in natural conjunction with the appointment of the Special Master. I mean, obviously, if the Special Master is going to be looking at these materials and making judgments, executive privilege over here, government document over there, then the government's not going to have their materials that they would presumably need for their criminal prosecution until after that work has been completed. Prosecutors say that Judge Cannon at the district court denied the government's subsequent motion for a partial stay because they submitted one on top of that. They said, Judge, we're all going to die if you don't let us continue our investigation. Can you please let us carry on? And she said, no. The court declined to address the government's argument that the special master review is unnecessary and unwarranted with respect to that discrete set of records, because they say they are government records not subject to any claim of return or privilege. Instead, they're saying that Judge Eileen Cannon just sort of ignored their main thesis. Instead, the court referred generally to factual and legal disputes, and the court reiterated that the injunction that stops the government from using the materials was necessary to make the special master meaningful. It doesn't have any teeth. So the government didn't like that, right? They really wanted this to move forward and rapidly. They have to have a prosecution. They're not going to get it in before the midterms. They're unhappy. The prosecutors continue. They say, the Court of Appeals granted a stay of Judge Cannon's order. The court said, yeah, we've got jurisdiction. We can review all of this stuff. And we say that they are, in fact, inextricably intertwined. The court at the 11th Circuit said that the standards were appropriately met, saying that Judge Cannon abused her discretion. And they said that if the government is not allowed to have these materials, that there will be an irreparable injury. So Trump won't be injured, but the government will, according to the 11th Circuit. And why? The 11th Circuit read that same affidavit that we read by that FBI official who said, yeah, it's going to be the end of us. It risks imposing significant harm on the United States. Some FBI agents, submitted an affidavit. He says, we're going to suffer substantial injury and the public interest is going to evaporate if this doesn't proceed. Meanwhile, the prosecutors say the district court denied a stay, even though we had this affidavit, and even though the very honest, the very trustworthy FBI, they said we're all going to die. Judge Cannon she didn't care. She's like, good, I welcome it. Hopefully it's painful. Prosecutors say, meanwhile, Cannon denied the stay. It issued another order appointing a special master. Ugh. And after the Court of Appeals entered the stay, the Court of Appeals telling the lower level court, you're on hiatus now, the district court, Judge Cannon, sua sponte, meaning on her own, and we read this here on this channel, issued a new order. So the 11th Circuit came out and they said, we've taken a look at your prior order. And the prior order, it really did 4 things. If you remember, there were sort of 2 things they didn't fight about. And the other 2 things were about the 100 documents and the criminal prosecution, whether it could continue or not. So they were fighting over those 2 things. And when the 11th Circuit came back down, Judge Cannon went back to the original order and she basically struck them out. She said, all right, well, I guess the 11th Circuit, they told us differently. So, okay, pull up that order. She said, give me a Sharpie. And just crosses out the 2 things and then republishes it. And she did that on her own. Nobody asked her to do that. So the government prosecutors are bringing that up. They say she did that. She deleted portions of the order addressing the review of the records bearing the classification markings. In other words, Special Master Raymond Dearie is no longer ordered to do those things because she just scratched them out. After the Court of Appeals granted the stay, it also granted the government's motion to expedite the appeal, the one that we're talking about that would eviscerate, that would get rid of the special master altogether. They got a stay first, and now they want the whole order gone. Briefing is set to be complete in that case in the Court of Appeals by November 17th, so still plenty of time on that. Meanwhile, the government's investigation is ongoing, as is the national security review that's being conducted by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That's why they're saying this is so urgent. Now let's take a look at some of the quick arguments here. As is usually the case with these sections, lots of case law, very heavy. So we'll take a quick look and see how quickly we can get through it. But we're on page 17 of 34. It says that Trump wants to vacate the partial stay that was entered. And you can see they're talking all sorts of standards here. A stay that's granted by the court is only appropriate when all this is case law. So we'll fly through this. They say Trump makes very little effort to show that they would be successful on the merits. Trump has not shown that the lower level court was clearly erroneous, saying that their analysis just doesn't carry weight in that basis. The Court of Appeals does have jurisdiction. Remember that Donald Trump was making a big claim that they were appealing this on an interlocutory basis. They have a footnote here. They say Trump is wrong to suggest that because the district court appointed Deary and specified the details and the mechanics of his review in the order, that they also effectively stayed that order too. They say the district court, this is a little bit spicy, and they tuck this away in a footnote. Government prosecutors say the district court itself, meaning Judge Cannon, apparently, when you use that language, apparently did not understand the Court of Appeals to have stayed any portion of the September 15th order, because after the stay was entered, the district court on its own modified the order to conform with the stay of the September 5th order. So they're saying that there's all sorts of confusion that's existing between even the Court of Appeals at the 11th Circuit and the district court. They're saying Judge Cannon doesn't even really know what she's doing. It's going to be funny to see what happens. If the Supreme Court sends this stuff back to Judge Cannon, she's not going to be happy with this. She's going to be like, what did you loser prosecutors at the DOJ say about me in footnote 3 when you were in front of the Supreme Court? What'd you say? Why don't you read that to me there on page 17? It says that I didn't understand. Apparently I didn't understand the Court of Appeals. Right? Judges don't like that at all. Judges don't appreciate that. All right. I understand it perfectly. Okay. I understand it exactly right. And don't tell me differently. So it's going to be interesting. Not going to be happy with those prosecutors. They talk about Clinton versus Jones. They talk about presidential immunity. They say the injunction here is immediately appealable under different rules. And that was Trump's basis for the appeal to the Supreme Court. He said they don't even have jurisdiction over any of this stuff in the first place. They write, Trump asserts that the two are not intertwined, but they say that they are. They continue, they say the Court of Appeals had jurisdiction over the entire order. And so as you can see, most of these are the arguments that we've already fleshed through already. Collateral orders, very technical stuff, as you would expect in a Supreme Court docket. So let's take a look at some of the concluding language before we wrap up on this segment. Here they close out in section 3. This is page 32 of the government's Supreme Court appeal response. And they're arguing to Judge Clarence Thomas. They say, Trump is not going to suffer any irreparable injury if he doesn't have the special master look at the 100 classified documents. They say that what Trump is challenging from the Court of Appeals, all it does is simply prevents dissemination of the documents from going to the special master while the government's appeal proceeds. Now, it's really funny what they're saying here. Look, this language is very clever. I actually think this is very clever. They're talking about this. This is a pejorative word. We often talk about we call this emotive conjugation in the law, where you say take a word and you add some emotion to it and you conjugate the word in a way that adds meaning to it. So an example that we often use on this channel is, think about the same conduct of a person leaving a location. One person is in a physical location, little mind experiment. One person is in a physical location and the action is they physically move from one location to another location. There's a couple different ways you can say that. Okay, one way you could say that is Johnny went home. He was at one location and he went home. Easy. You could also say he left. Where'd Johnny go? He left. Or he traveled to that location. He's now here. Okay, it's another action. Or you could say Johnny fled the scene, right? He sort of left. He left one location. Johnny went home. He left. Johnny went somewhere else. Johnny fled the scene. Different ways to say the same thing. It's the same action. Here, what they're talking about is the DOJ is preventing the dissemination of documents bearing classification markings. Preventing dissemination. It's not going to the New York Times, which they're okay leaking to, and the Washington Post. It's going to Judge Raymond Dearie, who's a very qualified, very accomplished Eastern District of New York judge who served on the FISA court. So they're talking about preventing dissemination to the special master. It's not going to anybody else. But you see the word that they used. They could easily substitute that word in. Court of Appeals partial stay simply prevents the transfer of documents bearing classification markings. But they call it dissemination because it's got a very negative connotation to it. It's a pejorative framing. Because if it's disseminated, who knows who can get their hands on it. But here they continue. They say, that limited relief imposes no harm, much less irreparable injury on the applicant. The applicant does not seriously argue otherwise. Indeed, Trump devotes only 2 sentences to irreparable injury. He says it's unnecessary for him to make that showing because the government's not likely to succeed on an appeal. And they say, look, Trump's claims cannot be reconciled. They say there's other cases from the U.S. Supreme Court, from Judge O'Connor, that says that the standard is how we see it, not how Trump sees it. And they also say that Trump is also asserting that he could be irreparably injured. And that if the government uses those materials, it could eventually lead to harm. And they continue, they say, because Trump has no plausible claims of privilege or ownership, which is the key issue that has not been litigated. The Supreme Court is ultimately going to weigh in on this. Who has possessory interest of those documents? Are there any situations in which Trump is protected? He sort of maintains a possessory interest in them. Is it presidential records? Don't know. Is it declassification? Don't know. Is it attorney-client privilege, executive privilege, work product doctrine? Any of those things? Don't know. Supreme Court is ultimately going to tell us. But the government says that Trump is going to suffer no harm if the special master doesn't get those materials. And therefore, Trump is undermining his own claims, they say, by opposing the government's motion, and that he hasn't established any irreparable injury. And therefore, we're asking the court to deny his request to disturb what they say is a modest partial stay entered by the Court of Appeals. In conclusion, they say the application should be denied, submitted by Elizabeth Pre-Logar. Elizabeth Pre-Logar, the Solicitor General. It's very interesting, the modest partial stay. I think it's pretty modest to ask for a special master, to ask for a referee to come in and monitor the entire investigation just to make sure that the corrupt DOJ that is highly politicized is not prosecuting their political enemies in a way that's inappropriate. That seems pretty modest. Seems pretty reasonable, but evidently not for the DOJ. They say that Trump should be reasonable in not having a referee step in and monitor what it is they are doing. And so that, my friends, is a big update. The government prosecutors submitted that request. Let's take a look at the Supreme Court docket and see if there's any new updates here. And as we can see, there are not. So these were the 3 entries that we had talked about at the start of this segment, but nothing here at the conclusion. We can see the Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar sent all of that in. I'll expect to see another order, probably from the Supreme Court, maybe tomorrow, with further instructions. But that, my friends, is it for the Trump segment. Some serious heavy lifting on the Scotus case. And once Scotus hits, it's going to work its way all the way down. It's going to hit the 11th Circuit, back down to Judge Cannon. We'll see what Special Master Raymond Dearie does, and we'll see ultimately who ends up holding on to those documents. But thank you for liking this video before you head on over to the next one. And thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you the next time we have a major Trump update here. All right, my friends. So we have a whole second segment that we've got to get into. We've got some election news. Tulsi Gabbard's leaving. And we've got some pretty big stuff happening in just a couple weeks. So we'll get right into it. Tulsi Gabbard walks away as Democrats continue to crumble in the polls, at least in a couple very key areas. You probably saw this headline, a little bit of an October surprise. Tulsi Gabbard, seen here, leaving the Democratic Party. And she uses some very choice language, calling the Democrats a bunch of warmongering wokesters, people who are out there race baiting and trying to wreck America at every turn. So we're going to watch a short snippet of this, but this came out from Tulsi Gabbard on her Twitter account, and she is actually launching a new show over on YouTube called The Tulsi Gabbard Show, and you can, of course, subscribe over there. Here you can see she posted this today, and it's causing a lot of feathers to be ruffled on the Democratic side. They're saying, "Get out of our party. We don't want you here in the first place." Here's what Tulsi said. Tulsi Gabbard writes, "I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that is now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness who divide us by racializing every issue and stoke anti-white racism, actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms, are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, demonize the police and protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, and believe in open borders." Says, "I believe in a government that is in it for the people." And she has a full statement over there on her Twitter account. But as you can see, 5.7 million views and counting on this video entitled, "I'm Leaving the Democratic Party." Here's Tulsi Gabbard.
"I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party
Good call.
That's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war." Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Do it. Join her. Walk away. Get out of that party. Who knows what they're doing over there? I'm not saying that the Republican Party is doing a whole lot better, but certainly time to cut ties with those woke warmonger cabals of lunatics out there who want to wreck America. And a lot of people are asking about this. Well, this is very interesting. Why is it coming out right now? It's October. It's perfectly timed. She's got a brand new YouTube show. Very, very convenient. So some people are raising their eyebrows on this one going, wait a minute. Hold on a minute. What's going on? Didn't she work for the young leaders of America, or young leaders, globalists, young global leaders, or something like that? Little, but at the same time, happy to welcome people out of the darkness into the light. And so hopefully Tulsi Gabbard drags with her a few 100,000, maybe independents, out of the darkness into a new way of thinking. So we'll welcome her with open arms, and anybody else who wants to come and join a different way of thinking. But certainly an interesting change and very interesting timing. And so you can color me a little bit skeptical. We'll see. We'll see, what happens here. WEF is in the chat. That's exactly right. WEF, right? The World Economic Forum, Young Global Leaders. Wasn't it her and Eye Patch McCain? Okay, so that's Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Tulsi Gabbard is leaving the Democratic Party. One big politician bails, and people are asking themselves why. Is it because the commander-in-chief is completely irrational? That's the word of the day. Joe Biden sitting down with Jake Tapper, and he's the commander-in-chief. He's supposed to be a rational, level-headed, well-thought-out individual who can lead America through difficult times to victory. President Biden sits down with Jake Tapper, and they have a conversation about the new possible world war that we're all about to enter into. And Tapper wants to know Biden's opinion about Putin. Do you think he's rational, or is he irrational? And how are you dealing with this leader? Because if he is irrational and we're dealing with him as though he is rational, maybe we're off our strategy. Very important question. Mr. President, what do you think of Putin?
Actor?
I think he is a rational actor who's miscalculated significantly.
Okay. Now,
I think he thought, you may recall, I pointed out that they were going to invade, that those 100,000 or more troops there, and no one believed.
There's the Chiron. The Chiron changes right there. Jake Tapper says, Mr. President, do you think Putin's a rational actor?
Actor?
I think he is a rational actor who's miscalculated significantly.
Okay.
I think he thought, you may recall, I pointed out that they were going to invade, that those 100,000 or more troops there.
Did you?
No one believed that he was going to invade Ukraine.
So then why did you only move over 8,500 troops with Lloyd Austin saying that this was a significant show of force for our NATO allies? Didn't work out all that well if you knew this was going to happen.
You listen to what he says. If you listen to the speech he made after, when that decision was being made, he talked about the whole idea of he was needed to be the leader of Russia that united all the Russian speakers. I mean, it's just, I just think it's irrational.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Did he just say it was irrational? Because at the start of this, it said, the president said that he was a rational actor. You can see it in the Chiron right there. President Biden, Putin is a rational actor who miscalculated. But then the president comes back out and says, actually, I think it's just irrational.
No one believed that he was going to invade Ukraine. You listen to what he says. If you listen to the speech he made after, when that decision was being made, he talked about the whole idea of he was needed to be the leader of Russia that united all the Russian speakers. I mean, it's just, I just think it's irrational.
What?
So if he's not rational and...
No, I didn't say he's not rational.
You said the speech wasn't
I think the speech is, his objectives were not right. I think he thought...
Oh, the speech was irrational. So he gave he's a rational person who just gave an irrational speech. Interesting.
Jake, I think he thought he was going to be welcomed with open arms. That this has been the home of Mother Russia in Kyiv, and he was going to be welcomed. And I think he just totally miscalculated it.
Okay, so that was irrational then. He totally miscalculated it, so it wasn't very rational.
So it's interesting there, John. You hear President Biden saying that Putin's speech was irrational, but pushing back when I suggested that he thought that Putin was irrational. No, that's not what I said, he said. So he's not, I guess he's refusing to insult Putin, but at the same time saying that this entire campaign is not rational.
So even poor Jake Tapper has some trouble with that one. He's trying not to call him irrational, but saying the things he does is irrational, but he's a rational person, and it's a very complicated situation. And this is what happens when you have no useful language anymore and you have a demented brain that can't help carry you from one thought into the next. So even Jake Tapper is having some trouble with that one. Now, Biden's not the only politician who has serious difficulties communicating. John Fetterman, who is running for the Senate, also having trouble. MSNBC was trying to communicate to its viewers that John Fetterman, even though you love him, may not be ready for prime time. Here's what that sounded like.
We had a monitor set up so that he could read my questions because he still has lingering auditory processing issues as a result of the stroke, which means he has a hard time understanding what he's hearing. Now, once he reads the question, he's able to understand. You'll hear he also still has some problems, some challenges with speech. And I'll say, Katie, that just in some of the small talk prior to the interview before the closed captioning was up and running, it did seem that he had a hard time understanding our conversations.
Couldn't even understand the conversation before the prompter was on. That's not good. When you're in the Senate, one of the things you have to do there is communicate. I mean, you hear these people. That's all they do is just sit around and talk in one big room after another. They just sit there behind the committee table and they just say, well, are you sure you're not wrecking America? And the witnesses say, totally sure. You can trust me. And they say, well, that's good enough for me. How much more money do you need? So, in second thought, actually, now that I think about it, John Fetterman might be great for the Senate. He's probably overqualified as far as I can tell now that we mention it. Okay. So speaking of Democrats who can't communicate or don't want to communicate, refuse to do that, Katie Hobbs, running for governor in Arizona. Still plenty of time on the clock left for a nice little debate. But you hear this individual and the way she talks, and I'm not sure I want to hear her in a debate, to be honest. I mean, I'd like to see it, but I don't know that I could sit through one. Here is Face the Nation asking Katie Hobbs, who's running for the governorship, if she's willing to just have a conversation with her opponent, Kari Lake. Of course, a debate would be nice. Is one going to happen?
One more time before we let you go, because I think it is on the mind of Arizona voters.
Yes.
Are you saying this morning that there is no circumstance that you can envision or would even try to negotiate in which you and Kari Lake would appear at a debate together before the election?
At this point in the race, with 30 days to go, our schedule in terms of forums is pretty much set. And I'm really happy with where we are and the plans we have to continue talking directly to the voters of Arizona.
You're not talking to me here, Katie. I live here. Hello. I'd love to see a debate because I'd like to see how you answer some questions. But her schedule is pretty much set. So they're all set here in Arizona. No debates from the Democrats because they don't care about Arizonans or anybody else. Nobody wants to debate any of the ideas. They'd rather just sit in their bunkers and let the voters or something take it over for them. Kari Lake, meanwhile, is willing to face America and Arizona. Kari Lake was out at the rally with Donald Trump. Trump very enthusiastic about Kari Lake, saying, you know, Arizona, she's going to be a big deal for you guys. She's going to be a big deal for the country as well. Here's Trump.
Everybody get out and vote for this unbelievable star. I really believe she's going to be a big star of the country, not just the party.
Big time.
Kari Lake. Kari, please come up.
Oh, man. Arizona, you're too good to me. Do you love this guy or what? I know for a fact President Trump loves Arizona, but President Trump, I think Arizona loves you even more. I really do.
Shout out. Shout out to Arizona.
Why wouldn't we love him? Think about, let's go back in history here, just a few years. Record low inflation. Our 401ks looked great. I just talked to a neighbor who's lost a third of his retirement savings since Joe Biden took office. We were doing great. Our kids were safe because our streets were safe. He supported the police. We had great times under President Trump. And we missed you so much, President Trump. Now, I got to tell you, I have some of these know-nothing consultants who tell me, you know, you really need to back away from President Trump right now.
Don't do it, Kari. No.
And I say to them, put down Hunter's crack pipe.
Yeah.
Right now.
Put down the crack pipe.
Wouldn't it be horrible? Wouldn't it be horrible? What would it say about my character if I stepped away from my friends? If I step away from my friends, that means I would step away from you, and I will never step away from the people of Arizona.
That's right, baby. Right on, Kari Lake. Right on, Kari Lake and Donald Trump. All right. So you can see the rally is going on out there, and they are having a good time out there, you know, talking about Hunter's crack pipe. Hey, Hunter's crack dealer is in our locals community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. So a lot of fun happening here in Arizona. Woo! Okay, and so that is what's going on with election 2022, my friends. It's going to continue to get wild because the Democrats, they can't even talk, and they're running for re-election. But we'll continue to cover it. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video, and I look forward to seeing you right here on the next one. All right, my friends, we've got one final segment before we jump into your questions and your comments coming in on the program. And we're going to hit some border stuff. We've got the New York's dereliction of duty. Kamala Harris blaming the border crisis on, I guess, herself, since she got appointed to deal with this by President Joe Biden. New York City declaring a state of emergency. J.D. Vance is taking it to his opponent, running for the Senate, and he's pointing out a very simple fact. Somebody's doing the raping out there. I mean, it has to be coming from somewhere. But first, before we understand exactly how catastrophic the border has become, let's listen to Kamala, because she was on with some talk show host, doesn't matter, and he is asking her about this crisis. And remember, Kamala was appointed by Joe Biden to go and rectify this whole situation. And she went down to Guatemala and she said, do not come. She gave a speech in one of their podiums and she wagged their fingers at all those Guatemalans. And she said, don't you come to our country. And they didn't listen to her. They ended up coming. Not only them, a lot of others did. And they keep coming in large numbers. And she's being asked about this. Kamala, can you help us understand what's going on with this border?
We're talking about people who have fled great harm. They've fled great harm.
Mm-hmm. Fled.
And they are coming here seeking refuge. And talk about political theater. I mean, playing games with people's lives, like with their lives.
Lives?
You know, there were mothers with sleeping babies getting off those buses.
Oh, the buses are the problem.
And I just think it's an absolute dereliction of duty. If you see a problem, and if we agree that we need to address it, then if you're a leader, participate in a solution.
Wow.
Right? When we first came in
That's
office,
a great idea. I love that idea. If you see a problem and you want to solve it, why don't you become a part of the solution? And if you don't, that's probably a dereliction of duty. Huh. Okay, well, I think there might be some problems around the country. Here's one. New York City declares a state of emergency due to several thousand migrants appearing in their city. New York Mayor Adams making the declaration saying New Yorkers are very angry. We didn't choose this. It's not our responsibility, and we need help.
New Yorkers are angry. I am angry too. We have not asked for this. There was never any agreement to take on the job of supporting thousands of asylum seekers. This responsibility was simply handed to us without warning as buses began showing up.
What do you think it's like down here at the border, my friend?
There's no playbook for this, no precedent.
That's the story of our lives here in Arizona and Texas. Take a look at this report from Fox News. Speaking of problems that Kamala Harris doesn't want to address, Fox News was out at the border interviewing migrants who are coming across in droves. Here's one scene and one interview with a migrant who said, "Thank you, Joe Biden. We love your administration. We're grateful to be here."
United States. Griff?
That's right, Ainsley, Brian, and Steve, good morning. And I'm just trying to process what I just heard from the vice president, that if you see a problem, well, let me show you a problem.
Right
we
here.
just had 200 plus migrants cross here in the Eagle Pass area. We're in Maverick County. They're from all over the world. In fact, I just met a few of these migrants here. Excuse me, sir. Where are you from?
Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka. How long have you been traveling?
For 45 days.
45 days you came from Sri
Wow.
Lanka. Did you come by boat? How did you come? Did you go through the jungle?
Yeah, everything. Board, jungle, we went through everything.
And our Vice President Harris says the border is closed, but do you think that the border is open?
Oh, we don't think.
And just let me ask you, sir, why are you here?
We want to live here. We like U.S.
Yeah, it's a good place.
Go to the U.S. And do you have any message for President Biden?
We thank him for accepting us for living here.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Joe Biden, for accepting us for living here. Did they not get the memo from Kamala? She said, "Do not come." This guy thinks that it's an open border. Thank you, Joe Biden. It's great to be here. We love America. I'll travel 45 days to get there. All because the president and Kamala refused to do anything to solve the border problem. While Democrats continue to try to recover some lost ground in the polls, immigration continues to be a topic. J.D. Vance was having a debate with Ryan over there in Ohio. J.D. Vance has been criticized for his abortion position. Tim Ryan brought this up in a debate, and J.D. Vance says, while you're so focused on abortion, an issue that really doesn't carry with it a lot of weight in the minds of many Americans, here's how I would address that question, says JD. They don't like that answer. They do not like it when they get blamed for that stuff, which of course is true. If they decided to secure the border, maybe those types of individuals would not be in the country, is JD Vance's argument. And of course, I think we skipped over this clip here, but as you saw, Tim was making the point that people care about abortion, and that was a main subject in JD Vance's debate. But that's not really what many Americans care about. New polls from MSNBC show Americans really don't care about abortion all that much at all. Instead, they care about things that matter, like inflation and like rising costs.
Said, when you look at our most recent NBC poll here and you ask folks, what is the single most important issue that's going to drive your vote in this year's midterm elections? A combined 34% cite either jobs in the economy or inflation. And you combine those two, that's the biggest single number you're going to get. And on that question, the Republicans have a nearly 30-point advantage over the Democrats.
Wow.
It's 8% in our most recent poll who cite abortion as the number one issue in their midterm vote. Democrats have a comparable advantage within that 8% over Democrats, but 34 versus 8. That's economy and inflation. That's where abortion is in between.
Not really that relevant. People care about the stuff that matters to them, the stuff that hits their pocketbook, and that precludes them from being able to put food on the tables for their families. Not so much about abortion, which of course is the centerpiece of the Democratic campaigns all around America. And so, of course, we'll continue to cover the border. We'll continue to cover all of the election stuff. Thank you for liking this video before you jump on into the next one, and I look forward to seeing you right back here. All right, my friends. Well, that's it for the segments on the show today. And I'm very grateful for all of the tremendous questions that came in. I'm sorry, all of the, we haven't gotten there yet. All of the super chats that came in is what I meant to say. And we've got comments that we're going to attend to. And we've got some super chats. I think there's actually one that came in, one or two. Let me take a look. So we are going to pull those up as we do a refresh over on locals and jump right into it. Let's see what we've got here. All right, so we're refreshing and we're scrolling all the way down to the bottom to see what we've got from the locals crew. And first in the house is Ray K.O.K. Ray K.O.K. I think shared the Project Veritas video. Yeah, and so I'd invite you to go watch this whole thing. Apparently she was at an In-N-Out and having a hamburger, and everybody's watching this. It's not a good scene. But like I said, I'd encourage you to go follow Project Veritas and support their work over there. But yeah, brutal takedown. So certainly look that one up. Don't Be Hatin' says, any court dockets today? Yeah, we got the SCOTUS stuff. We hit that one hard. Jeff Rooks says, I got 2 words for you. Soap and water from Jeff Rook. That's a Duke Hazard clip. Jeff Rook also says, off topic a little bit, I'm no Einstein. I'm a mechanical engineer. I trust Rashida Tlaib. Tried to share a timestamp link. Okay, so I'll have to take a look at that one. Talking about Celsius and handling nukes. Okay, so an interesting clip here from Rashida Tlaib. Thank you, Jeff. Viantika says, I wonder how long it'll take before you start reusing your singular words for the live streams. Oh, I've already done that. I've already done that many times. I'm trying to think of what word I've used a lot. Like, I don't know, warrant or unsealed. Probably unsealed. I've probably used 3 or 4 times. I try not to use that one, but it's such a good one. Today, I think, was a new one. Intrusion, I think, was the first appearance of intrusion. Hunter's crack dealer, I told you he's here, says, just a reminder, said with an evil laugh, as the Ukrainians say, the war must go on. It's GIF season. It's gift season. It's GIF season. It's gift season. Thank you for fanning the flames, Hunter's crack dealer, as usual. We have former LEO says, Tulsi walked away from the Democrats, but they gained Liz Cheney. Well, that's a big win for our side. Yeah, I don't really consider myself a Republican, by any stretch, but I certainly, am more aligned with, let's say that side far more than I am the other side, obviously. And yeah, a Tulsi gain and a Liz Cheney give all day. You'd make that trade all day. You'd probably pay for that. You'd like, okay, we'll give you, look, I'll tell you what, we'll give you a Liz Cheney and we'll give you an Adam Kinzinger. Okay. We'll give you 2 for a Tulsi all day. Make that trade. No problem. Robute is here, says, yes, Tulsi should be independent. Sick of the uniparty screwing the U.S. people with excess fiscal spending and inflation and pointless wars. Rai says, can you update your future YouTube descriptions to include links to your locals, Rumble, and anywhere else you are? Yeah, I can. I have a link tree in there, which will take you there. Are you saying that you don't like the link tree, Rai? I think that's maybe what you're saying. Here, this one came in from former LEO. It's a Joe Biden video. So watch that one over from former LEO. That's on our locals. Viantika says, anyone here think Clarence Thomas would be getting as much scrutiny as he's getting now if he were white? It's a good question. I don't know. That's a good question. Viantika says we need a poll on this. That is a good question. I'm not so sure about that one. Good question. Jeremy says, how is it possible for the government to seek appeal in a court not having jurisdiction over the case? Well, it's a great question, but they're fighting over that. So Trump said they don't have jurisdiction and the government says they do. So they're asking the Supreme Court to weigh in on it. Jeff Rook says, I searched the recent comments, didn't find this anywhere. I just think people should know socks are important. And that is exactly right. Exactly right. You definitely should be wearing them. If you're not, you're probably, stinking up your shoes. Here, C. Rose says, I'm in law school in criminal appellate clinic this semester. I think it's going to make me a better trial attorney. What are your thoughts generally about criminal appellate work? I'll provide examples to help you answer. Do you think they work? Are they too much work? How often have you done them, etc.? I appreciate your input. Well, it's a good question, C. Rose. So I'll be perfectly honest with you. So I don't have a lot of appellate work. The reason why, so, this is broad strokes commentary, so take it with a grain of salt. But when I was practicing more criminal law, I was sort of a criminal lawyer who wanted to be in the action. Okay, criminal law is a very action-oriented practice of law. It requires going to court, physically going to court. Other practice types, many people think lawyers are like in and out of court all the time, like you see in Suits or like you see in, Hollywood. That's not really the reality in most cases. Okay, if you talk like a personal injury lawyer, most of them settle cases pre-litigation, right? Meaning they're not even going to litigate. It's all being settled sort of outside of the courts. Trust and estates, wills, contracts. Most things actually are sort of transactional law. There's two practice areas which really are not and probably will not ever be. And there's some pretty good books on this. One's called like The Future Law Practice and stuff. Like they think that maybe AI will automate some of this stuff away. And so they say some areas of law are a little bit more hardened in terms of practice. And they're the people areas of law, criminal law and family law, right? A lot of activity. You're dealing with people all the time. It's hard to automate that away. Somebody might come to us and I might have the best AI in the world, but if they're scared their son's going to go to prison for 20 years, the AI can only do so much about that, right? So the reason why this is relevant is because there's sort of a difference there between what I think are very good criminal practitioners, criminal defense practitioners, and then very good appeal criminal lawyers. Now, I think it's important to have both skill sets, and I have filed appeals, and our law firm does file appeals, and we have won appeals, and they are worthwhile. And I think that appeals are a critical component of the entire justice system, because if nobody appeals anything, it's the same thing. If nobody goes to trial, the government wins every time by default. So if you lose, like I've appealed cases, I won. Actually, that wasn't an appeal. It was sort of. There's a lot of complexities in this space. We have won appeals. I'm trying to think of an appeal that I won that was consequential. It wasn't like a guilty verdict appeal. It would have been like an interlocutory appeal, or we call them special actions, where you go up on one thing and you come back down and get a remedy. The point is, yes, they're valuable. You have to be able to hold the government's teeth to the fire. I think that they are, if you want to be excellent at them, I think that you probably should really specialize on them, write a lot of them, write a lot of appeals and be an excellent writer. I think that if you are an appellate writer, I sort of joke that they're the smart lawyers who want to, sort of sit behind the books and really dig into the meat and potatoes. You're reading transcripts. You're really, reading case law. It's a lot. And so it requires sort of, if you take a Colby test, I would say that it would make you a high, you want to be like a high fact finder, high follow through. Whereas if you're probably more of a litigator, you're going to be a quick start, a high quick start. So, it just depends on what kind of lawyer you want to be. Great question. I could talk all day about that. C. Rose, thank you. Former says, did you see the article where they stated that there was a skiff at Mar-a-Lago from 2007 to 2008? No. Why would that be, though? That was before Trump was even thinking about office. JFK had a bunker there? Oh, so it's even more secure than we thought in the first place. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that, former LAO. Maybe the documents were in the bunker. How can you argue with that? Here's another one from Jeff Rook says, I'm so tired of these people. They're just going after Trump because he got rid of their trade deals to allow people to send their sock factories to China. Bring the socks back. Socks are important. Jeremy says, bless you, Rob, for having the fortitude of mind to read through the documents that are capable of inducing a coma. Yeah. Having been through business law and as an avid viewer of this show, I don't remember another case that has nearly caused me convulsions. Do you think this case is designed to be that way, or is it just the most ridiculous set of circumstances that have ever existed in our system? I mean, it's just all over the place and nonsensical. Just saying. I think you're pretty much right about this, Jeremy. Any times you have, cases that are sort of a matter of first impression, never really seen anything like this, you get to see interesting arguments. And it's pretty amazing to me that the government, when they would take an unprecedented step of raiding a president, like, for example, if the tables were turned and Trump raided Hillary, I personally would feel way better about it if there was somebody like a special master who was involved, somebody who was overseeing all of this stuff. Right? Just as a pure matter, like I'd like somebody to just take a look at it. Even like the Mueller stuff. Like I'd rather have Robert Mueller appointed than an oppositional political party, like a special counsel or something, I think is at least 1 degree of separation better than having an actual DOJ, a political opponent, prosecute your enemy. That's what's happening here. Biden is prosecuting Trump. That's it. Yes, it's nuts, but it's happening. Caddy did too. Says, is my memory failing me? I was going to say, I thought you were saying, is my memory failing me? Which is probably yes. Didn't Judge Cannon say that there were to be no more leaks? Yet more leaks are out today concerning the raid issues, and there have been many leaks. We covered one of them yesterday about Christina Bobb. Actually, the government is prosecuting their case by leaks. What can be done? Isn't that order as important as the others? Isn't there some legal action to gag them? It's so frustrating, and to be truthful, it makes me furious. Yeah, it should. Caddy did too. It makes me furious too. It's a real big problem with our DOJ. And again, the process is the penalty. Doesn't matter what Trump did. Doesn't matter if they're documents or not, if they're nuke codes or not. Doesn't matter. None of that matters. It ultimately does matter. But for this moment in time, in this current position, this current context, the process is the penalty. You're making Trump pay with lawyers and public scrutiny and media reports all over the place, and they keep leaking these things out. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's what they're trying to do. If they had enough, they would just charge him. Or why don't you guys just indict him then? Just indict him. Let's get this over with. Because they'd rather just drag this thing out. Jason says, could it be that Trump knew Justice Thomas was going to be covering the 11th Circuit, and that's why they went this way? Knowing that cases are going to go up to him, knowing that he is fair and equitable? So I don't think that there was sort of that sort of advanced strategic planning. Trump's been in Mar-a-Lago for a lot longer than he was president. So I don't think this was I think it was very convenient, very, very nice coincidence. He says, and on that subject, I hope that Justice Thomas goes full bohica on the Biden and the Biden DOJ. And if you're not familiar with what bohica means, well, you can Google that one. It's not that bad. Bend over, here it comes again is what it means. Here, Vientica says, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Tulsi video was to garner buzz for her new show. Yeah, probably a safe bet there. I posted in the comments on Rumble asking what she plans to do. Join the Republican fake other party or what? Most of the responses I got were window lickery. It was very strange. I posted the link on the main page if anyone wants to see. Oh, that's interesting, V. I don't know. I'm skeptical about all those young global leader people. I'm not real sure what they're all about. Hey, speaking of them, here, speaking of it, Jason on blast, money with the comments, says, Jason says, I refuse to trust Gabby for a vote or elected office and why she voted for the youth leadership. Both her and Pirate Eye Patch McCain are global youth leaders for WEF. I've not heard either of them explain it or disassociate themselves with the organization or their choices. I believe Eye Patch McCain said it was a passive program he had no choice in. Sure, guy. Why just you then? Here's this clip. Here's this link. The Forum of Young Global Leaders. Look at all these people. Zuckerberg's on there. Pete Buttigieg. Macron is on there. You've got Dan Crenshaw and Tulsi Gabbard. And then I think that's the Telegram guy too. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that, Jason. M. Kungla says, I have a feeling that this investigation is designed to fail and Trump would win in the end so that the current administration could use this case as an advantage and reference leverage after their term ends, and they would become under real investigation, just looking how they like to reference old cases. Oh, I see what you're saying. So they're sort of trying to get some precedent established so that they could maybe use it later down the line. I think they really want to get Trump. I'm not so sure that they want Trump to win. In other words, that it's designed to fail. I think they really want to get him. But I understand your point. Vientica says, I wonder if this might be a time where a party falls and another one comes around to take its place, which leads to a new boss, same as the old boss. Yeah, look, as we've said, I think it's just one party gets fat at the trough. The other party takes a break. Then the fat party gets too fat. They need to take a break. Otherwise, they're going to be looking like bad dinner guests and they'll be asked to leave. And so Democrats get fat for a few years. Then the Republicans get fat for a few years. And meanwhile, we're all paying the bill. Former says, look at the cheat sheet that Biden has on his lap with all of the answers to Jake Tapper's questions. I saw that. It is really pretty embarrassing. In fact, I forgot to mention that when we covered this. Here, let's take a look at this. Over on the Biden thing, you can actually see what Former's talking about. Here, take a look. So here, there's this note card right there in his hand, and he actually sort of waves it around. They zoom in close there, and watch this. Here is where he, no, I wasn't talking about that.
I just think it's irrational.
Here, watch
So
his hand.
if he's not rational and
No, I didn't say he's not rational.
See his
You said
hand,
the
that
speech
paper
is
card
bad.
there?
I think the speech is, his objectives were not right. I think he thought, Jake, I think he thought he was going to be welcomed with open arms. That this has been the home of Mother Russia in Kyiv, and he was going to be welcomed.
See
and
that card? Why does he have that in his hand? What is that?
Mother Russia in Kyiv, and he was going to be welcomed, and I think he just totally miscalculated.
Totally miscalculated. He's a rational thinker who is completely irrational. Got it. All right, that's our president. Now, we also had some questions here. Anti-Fragile is here. Says, just came out today, 30 years of Democrats. Tides are changing. Another poll has pegged Republican Congressman Alan Fung as the leading candidate in Rhode Island, furthering speculation of a GOP upset. Fung is edging out Democratic rival Seth, 45-37, 13% undecided. Others, yeah, so, wow, that's pretty amazing. So Rhode Island might be going red on that district. Shout out to Anti-Fragile. Former says, electing Fetterman woman would have the same results of getting Biden elected. Facts Matter said, who's the real propagandist? See the bombing videos side by side. Ooh, let's take a quick gander at this. I'm always, got to be careful with some of these videos and sort of where they come from. Oh, yeah. So they've got some compare and contrast. So go over to Locals if you want to check that one out, of course. Let's see what else we've got here. Ray K says, I want more Katie Hobbs impersonations, please. Well, I can't. I can only do so much. Otherwise, I might have to jump out my window, throw myself out the window. Underscore Shade says several leaders and wannabes were in those WEF, UN, so and so forth, including Putin. But that does not mean they're all of that mind. It's also a term thing to join, like 3 to 5 years. I forget now. Watch, Tulsi's going to be in high office, Secretary of State or even VP, with inside knowledge of the enemy within and military experience she has. Best thing Trump could do, bypass both parties, create a new party, this time ripe for it. He was never really a Republican or a Democrat in the first place. That's over from underscore Shades. Yeah, I mean, I could see that, right? A Tulsi or a Kari Lake Trump ticket. Former LEO says, I hope you noticed Ryan's eyes, just like a deer in the headlights. Go back, it's worth a look. Ryan's eyes. Which Ryan are we talking about? Tim? Tim Ryan?
As an
said, probably these eyes here.
18-year-old girl raped in our community, raped in our state in the first place. The thing the media and Congressman in this state in the first place. Yeah, he does look pretty much. You voted so many times against.
I can see that there. That came in from former LEO. E. Dantes says, how is it possible for these politicians like New York governor not to see the irony in trying to understand the deal with immigration? Amazing. It is. Like the self-awareness is shocking. Isn't it shocking? He says, we didn't ask for this, as though Texas, Arizona, all the other states did. We had a comment in here from Zach Nichols saying, don't want to offend Kelly. I don't know what that one is, Zach. Going to do a refresh on Locals before we wrap it up for the day. Okay, here, this one came in from FedCure. Oh, FedCure said about the Joey thing. Yeah, so Paul Minot shared us the incredible GIF. And do I have that handy? I think I have that handy. Paul Minot shared an amazing GIF for us. Here, let me pull this one up. I sent it over to JoJo, and Joe said, we should put that on Channel 3 News, which obviously he's right. This is the GIF, courtesy of Paul Minot, our meme smith. Joey G, MCU expert, baby. He said, put it on Channel 3. And I said, well, I don't have access to Channel 3. He said, okay, well, play it on the show tonight. And I said, okay, I'll play it tonight. He said, do it. So thank you, Paul, for doing that. I'm going to do it. And we did it. There it is. So shout out to Joey and Paul Minot for that. But he says, FedCure says, before your brother sees this, Marvel hijacked Avengers to talk about some of the jab stuff. Thank you for thinking of that with Joey. Yeah, Joey's got a unique situation, obviously, with all of his medical stuff. Joey was in the hospital for 48 days with COVID. He almost died like 3 times. It was a really traumatic summer for our family back in 2020. Really, really rough summer. But he made it. My mom made it. She was in the hospital with him for 48 days. It was an ordeal, but he made it. So we're very happy he's alive. This one came in from Facts Matter. Says one more side-by-side. How it started. Inflation 1.4%, now 8.3. Gas 239, now 376. 30-year mortgage 2.65, now up to 7%. Holy moly, I didn't even realize that. Average rent $1,600, up to $2,000. NASDAQ up 13,000, now down 10. Grocery prices up 3.7% under Trump, now up 13.5%. 1.5% electricity, up for Trump, 15.8% under Biden. Real average hourly earnings up by 4%, real hourly earnings down by 2.8%. I don't think that many people really realize that. It's horrible. It's really just terrible. And it's not going away anytime soon. They're just continuing to go nuts. All right. And so we had another one come in from Rye T in the house. Says Ryan looks like he's tweaking. Yeah, he may have been up on something. Former says, I'm a trained observer. I can't help it. So Rye T and Former are speaking the same language. This one came in from DKT News. Says Paul was one of the recent 11 pro-lifers that was arrested last week. So we talked about the 11 pro-lifers who were arrested. Let me see what this one is. Okay. So says that all right. So there's a gentleman named, it looks like Paul. Before I share this link, I want to make sure that this is sort of the right link. So I want to be careful before I share fundraising links. I'm not doubting you, DKT News. But there's an individual named Paul, president of Personhood Tennessee. He's going to be on Laura Ingraham tonight. So let me just share that. So he's going to be on Laura Ingraham tonight. I'll be putting together a larger post this week after I gather more info. I'd like to donate to Paul's defense and support the fight. Personhood Alliance has created a way to do so. So if you want to go support Paul from Personhood Alliance Network, feel free to do that. But I just want to, I want to make, like, there's people set up, I'm not accusing you, DKT News, of doing this, but, I just want to make sure that the money actually goes to where it's supposed to go. So make your support known if you'd like to support. Thank you, DKT News, for sharing that. I'm sure it's all above board and the money's going to be good, but just exercise caution with all of the fundraising that goes out there, because there's people who are taking advantage of these defendants, right? Like, the money's not going to defendants. I've seen a lot of that with J6 and stuff like that. So I just want to be a little bit cautious. But thank you, DKT News. We talked all about the arrests that took place last week. Did a whole segment on that. Mark Huck and the others that had the FBI sort of ransack their residence. Pretty terrible stuff. And of course, as we talked about with Trump, the process is the penalty, right? They need money. They need funds, because there's people don't have rainy day legal defense funds. Most people. Here, this one came in from The Veil. Rob, can't help myself. Way too funny in the locals chat. It all started with a chicken leg posted in a pic. So someone I won't name who mentioned that if the leg was dressed up, it'd be a good-looking chicken leg and foot. Then it jumped immediately to socks. It's socks and more socks. It was socks galore. Chickens soon popped up in the pics with shoes on. Cats were diving into drawers, pulling out socks. Bonnie Speck showed us her socks, and Prime, or was it Paul, showed us how he washed his socks. Man, then it ended with people testing out windows if they could handle a lick test. Did you get my email that I sent you the day you returned from your Yellowstone trip? I definitely don't remember. But what the hell is this? What the hell is this? I don't know what this is. Okay, so I'm going to have to go check out the locals chat. So apparently that's why Jeff Rook was talking about socks in the comments. I don't know anything about that. I'm curious about what Bonnie's socks look like now, and Paul, how you wash your socks. And this dude's licking this glass, which is a weird thing for the show. But all right. So I'm not real sure what was going on over there today. But I'm going to go check it out. I'm scrolling up right now. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are a lot of these licking images. Here's another one for our pleasure, our viewing pleasure. That's from Super. There's more. There's a bunch more of them over there. And that one is a little too much. We're not going to do that one on the... What the heck is that creature? I don't even know what that is. All right. So you can see what's going on over there on Locals. That was from Super Troopers. That was when that guy was all cracked out on all of the drugs from Super Troopers. Yeah, we're not going to do any more of the licks. All right. So that, my friends, is it from all of you, your amazing comments and questions from our tremendous community over there at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And there's a lot of activity going on over there. And you can see we covered some of that. Shout out to my friends Paul Mino. We've got Zach Nichols. We have C. Reeds in the house. We have JC the Music Man's over there in the DKT News. Yes, it's the National. Okay, if you look at the Give Send Code page, it's set up. Okay, so DKT News is saying it's all legit. It's all above board. It's set up by Personhood Alliance. And I didn't mean to impugn your integrity, DKT News. I just want to be careful. And so thank you for sharing that and supporting everybody over there. Caddy did too. Zach Nichols, B Spec. We've got the Rye-T. They're all chatting away. Thank you, everybody. Also, thank you to our friends who join up on YouTube. And remember, we have those morning walk and talks. And so every morning we like to post just sort of a carrying on of the conversation. Whether you're a member on Locals or on YouTube, you get access to those videos. And this morning, my goodness, there was an interesting one this morning. There was a fire that took place in downtown Phoenix. So let me show you what this one looked like. So I was walking around this morning here for our member video, and I think it was like around a couple minutes in that we actually saw a fire downtown.
Extremely dense. And that's good.
Where are our fire bros at? The video's not letting me seek very appropriately. But this is what we're talking about with our morning walk and talks. And I was trying to queue up the firefighters, but it was a big smoky scene downtown today. And if you want to sort of join in on those conversations and some of that fun.
Aloha.
You can.
Thank you so much for joining me
Tulsi.
today.
Hey, Tulsi, pipe down. All right. There it is. That's the morning walk and talk. I don't know if you could see any of that, but this is what I was trying to communicate that we were talking about this morning. Anyways, if you're a member, you can come and join us over there and join in on that fun. And I appreciate your support. I also am a lawyer at the R&R Law Group, where we have a mission to help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that, in their lives. We love to help people. Anytime somebody's in trouble with the law, we preserve the presumption of innocence. We demand that the burden of proof be maintained and rely with the government. And we do a great job. We have an awesome team of people. We offer free case evaluations. Anytime somebody's in trouble in the state of Arizona, we can help. 480-787-0394, online at rrlawaz.com. And I really am grateful for your referrals, your support, thinking about us. You do keep us busy, and you make our time here possible. So thank you very much for that. I also want to thank the mods before we log off for the day. Thank you to Vienticus Prime, K Bean, Just Cause. We've got Lean in the house, along with Playin' Hooky, Ronnie Cole, Zulu. I saw Geomancy Games in here. You can subscribe on YouTube to his channel. And I want to thank our Spotlight supporters as well. Thank you to Chris Romero, David B3, Dr. EMB in the house, along with John over at QSimple.com. Go check out QSimple.com. But that, my friends, is it for us for the day. I want to thank you for being a part of the amazing show. And not because of anything I did, but because of you and your questions and comments, of course. And the licking and all sorts of socks and all sorts of stuff. It wouldn't be the same without you. And so I'm grateful for it. But that is where we'll leave it right here. We are going to be back again tomorrow to do it all again. And I hope to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Have a tremendous evening, my friends. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.